Hey, Tada, Mzansi, South Africa, my home country, Africa, Europe, Asia, South America, North America, Australia, and everywhere where the SimplyLebo podcast followers are listening in from, whether you're in the car, you're in the bus, you're in the train, you are in an Uber, or in South Africa, we also have Bolt and many other platforms. Whether you're driving, whether you're at home, whether you are being driven, wherever it is you're listening from, I want to appreciate you and welcome you to the 12th installment. Yes, officially, this is our 12th episode of the SimplyLebo podcast. And I want to appreciate every single one of you that have journeyed with us from back when we started this podcast not so long ago. The month was the month of April of 2023. And I want to appreciate all the support of everyone that has journeyed with us thus far. It has been an incredible journey. And yes, let's deal with the elephant in the room. It has been a while since we published an episode. And I want to say sincere apologies to those of you that have had to wait a while. And if it's the first time you're joining us, where have you been? Welcome. We're happy to have you here. We're very honored. And continue to share this with your friends, your network. And I believe today is going to be one of those episodes that are going to be impactful and it's going to be value for your money. So where have we been? In our first 12th or rather 11th episodes, our first 11 episodes have pretty much been around leadership. I'm very passionate about leadership. I'm very passionate about raising leaders of tomorrow, particularly authentic leaders who genuinely lead from the heart, more human leadership as I prefer to call them. Having been away, I took some time to reflect on where, I would like this episode or rather this podcast to go next. And through thorough reflection, I realized there's a lot more other topics that I'm equally passionate about. I'm really loving leadership and the responses we've been getting, by the way, have been absolutely phenomenal. In fact, let me pause here and say, in our first month, when we launched this episode and we were doing weekly episodes, one episode a week, we amassed such a following that we were ranked amongst the top 5 most listened to episodes in my country, in South Africa. And I was blown away by that. And I can only appreciate you for validating, the inspiration and the calling that I believe is upon my life. So we're going to move slightly away from leadership as a topic. I believe a lot of the topics that we will continue to cover will pretty much every now and then still touch on aspects of leadership. But I pretty much believe in life coaching. I believe in really speaking to the wholeness of who we are. And today will be the beginning of that next phase of our journey. And the topic we'll be covering today is one of my favorites. It's called emotional intelligence, or others would prefer to call it emotional maturity or emotional quotient. All right, so a lot of emphasis over probably the past 100 years has been placed on emotional, or rather IQ, which is intelligence quotient, right? And I mean, you see this particularly if you've been blessed enough to have applied for a job and were hired. You would most likely have gone through a what do they call these psychometric tests, a lot of which really have to deal with the mind, the IQ of a human being. There was nothing necessarily wrong with it, but I think over probably the last 20 years or so, there's been an increase in awareness of the value of emotional intelligence as the human race continues to evolve. Because I mean, if you think about it, IQ is good, but there is a level of complexity that one can only be able to deal with if you're able to master your emotions. So what is then EQ, or emotional intelligence? So I've done a little bit of reading and I came across one of the foremost scholars of emotional intelligence, and his name is Daniel Goleman, and he speaks about, and he even writes about emotional intelligence, and this is how he defines emotional intelligence, and I quote, "Emotional intelligence is described as a person's ability to manage their feelings so that those feelings are expressed appropriately and effectively." Close quote. So I want to just share a disclaimer here before we go any further. This episode is not an attack on emotions. I'm not here to advocate against emotions, but rather how to manage those emotions effectively, right? So I believe emotions, personally, were given to us by our Creator in order for us to be able to express ourselves. Can you imagine life without emotions? We will be walking zombies, right? We'll be walking, cold, dead cold. We will not be able to express sadness, happiness, joy, anger, frustration, you name it. All of these are God-given. Where I'm taking our episode today is around how to manage these such that they don't become our masters, but that we master them. Emotions, that is, right? So Daniel Goleman speaks to this particular, as I said, he's a foremost scholar, and he speaks on this particular, topic quite comprehensively. He's written and studied and done a whole lot of experiments, and he has come up with about 5 elements of emotional intelligence, which I want to unpack a little bit, but ultimately we're just going to hone in on 1 or 2 of these 5. There's 5 elements that he defines, and I want to run through these very quickly as we journey together in this particular episode. And one of them is self-awareness, and that's the one we're going to hone in on a little bit later. And self-awareness, he defines, or rather, as he unpacks it, he talks about your ability to assess your strengths and weaknesses, and to know your moods and triggers. Your ability to assess your strengths and weaknesses, and to know your moods and triggers. We're going to come back to self-awareness in a moment. That's the first one. The second one, he talks about self-regulation, right? Learning self-calming techniques and then to allow emotions to pass through you, and then to reflect before making decisions. I think that's so important. Learning self-calming techniques, allowing your emotions to pass through you, and then to reflect before making decisions. That is so important. The third aspect of emotional intelligence, according to Daniel Goleman, he talks about empathy. Empathy is the ability to be aware of the moods and viewpoints of others, and to practice acts of kindness on purpose, to be generous, reliable, and slow to judge. Woo, that could preach, eh? Let's talk about the fourth one. The fourth one is motivation, or I would like to call it self-motivation, right? This is the ability to face challenges head on, to work one step at a time, to take time to celebrate and reassess when you reach each milestone. Right? That's motivation or self-motivation. The final one, which really encapsulates all of them, in my humble opinion, Daniel Goleman talks about the ability to reach out to others, to listen well, and to work to diffuse disputes. To trust that your ideas add to the conversation. So, in my humble opinion, social skills is actually one of probably the most important aspects of these, because no man is an island, as the saying goes, right? But being emotionally intelligent and really working on it intentionally allows you to really be effective in social engagements. This is not about whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, as some of you may be aware of such concept. This is just about your ability to get on with others, your ability to deal with conflict situations, your ability to add value to conversations at any level, in any setting, right? So I want to hone in on self-awareness. And this is simply because I've done a little bit more reading and probably my own reflections and thoughts on self-awareness. What is it at heart? And I define it as follows. And I took some of these aspects, just from just the dictionary, call it definition of what self-awareness looks like. So it looks as follows, in my humble opinion. Self-awareness is the conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. Can I repeat that? Self-awareness is the conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. It sounds complicated, right? But it's not. It's really being present, present in the moment, present in every engagement, present in every interaction with others. Having that level of consciousness of why you say certain things and why you do certain things. What are your motives? What are your desires in any engagement that you engage in? And in inverted commas here, I wrote, the process can be painful in a way, but it leads to a greater sense of self-awareness. I further define it as follows, or maybe one could argue and ask the question, how does one then increase their level of self-awareness, right? And I'm here to help you with that, with a little bit that I know, right? So self-awareness comes through the following ways. It comes through authentic and honest feedback from others, number one. It comes also through regular and honest reflection on one's own thoughts and actions. I want to pause here for a moment and say, not a lot of people are comfortable with getting feedback from others, right? And I want to make a distinction here because sometimes certain people will criticize you for the sake of it, right? Maybe because they are intimidated by you, or they just simply don't like you, they just don't get along with you, or you don't get along with them, whatever the case may be. So again, there is a level of discernment that's required when you are getting feedback from others. I'm personally of the view that any feedback from others is welcome. What is important is you increasing your level of self-awareness and emotional maturity to the extent where you're able to deal with whatever that feedback. It's important to get feedback from others, especially if it's honest and authentic. If it's from people that you respect, that you love, and that love you back and respect you back, pay attention to that, because that is one way of increasing your level of self-awareness. Because as a human being, you're not aware of your own blind spots. All of us, I believe, we've got blind spots. All of us, I believe, we've got areas that others can see and we can't, because we don't see ourselves in the way that they see us. Right? So it's important. And somebody once said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. As a human being, or as a leader, as a father, as a husband, as just a relational human being, be open for feedback from others. The second way I talked about regular and honest reflection. I'm a weird guy in a way that I often spend quite a bit of time in the evenings and on weekends just purely reflecting. Just thinking around what happened last week. How did I show up? What conversation did I have with this one and that one? And how did I come across? Why would I say this instead of that? Could I have done this differently as opposed to that? And I've found that the more I do that, the more it enriches my next engagements with people, right? For me, this is not just about for managers or leaders. This is just generally for human beings. If you want to have fruitful relationships, trust me, no amount of IQ or just purely intelligence is going to help you to maintain a relationship or to have a successful relationship. There are a lot of clever people, genius people that cannot hold down relationships. There are a lot of clever leaders or managers and executives that fail to to have meaningful relationships, and that fail to become actually effective leaders, more human leaders in their roles. Why? Because they simply have not worked on this area of emotional intelligence. So take time to honestly reflect on your own thoughts and actions, and it will definitely help you in your emotional intelligence journey. So I mean, think about it. As we wrap up today's conversation, prisons are filled with people who could have managed their emotions better, who could have stopped for a moment and thought about the impact of their actions instead of being triggered by anger and simply acting purely because in the moment they were enraged, right? And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to claim, to psychoanalyze anybody. But if I believe, if we, all of us, took time to really first stop and pause and think about what we are about to say in a moment of anger, in a moment of outburst, in the moment where we feel offended, we will have a much better response to whatever it is that has triggered our emotions in that moment. So, and also if you think about it, right, the graveyards are filled with people who might have not been there had they paused for a moment and thought about their actions. Also, if you think about it, I'm not saying everybody that has passed, it is their fault. There could be many other reasons. But if you think about also the aspect of road rage, where people got in an altercation simply because somebody cut them off by the freeway or by the robot or by whatever the case may be. And by the way, if you're American, the robot is the red light or the street light, right? In South Africa, it's the robot. In that moment of enragement, had you thought about it, had you paused, possibly, it may have ended very differently. Let's take it to the workplace. How often, sometimes you get an email that just triggers you, and this colleague just sends, something that even they could have thought about first before they clicked send, as to how the other person may have received or perceived their intentions to be behind, particularly the written communication. I love written communication. I believe I'm a writer and a speaker at heart, but in the context of dealing with conflict, I would strongly advocate against writing to the other person to put your point across, because you are not in control of how they receive it, how they read it on the other end. You're better off picking up the phone and engaging them so that they feel you, they sense the genuineness in your voice, in your tone, and then you deal conflict much easier. So these are some of the benefits, and I want to wrap up today's conversation with what I believe are some of the benefits of a heightened sense of emotional intelligence. And I'm going to run through them fairly quickly, just as a form of takeaways from today's conversation. And I hope it has been as impactful to you as it is to me, certainly. Why is emotional intelligence important? What are the benefits? Benefit number one: the further you advance in your leadership journey, in your marriage journey, in any relational journey, the more EQ you need. Now, I'm not saying you don't need any IQ. IQ is important, but IQ, has its place. And that's as far as it goes. There's a place where emotional intelligence must kick in. And as I said earlier, there are many intelligent people who fail to hold down a relationship, who fail to lead effectively because their emotional intelligence capacity is that low or poor. Second benefit is that your EQ empowers your ability to handle complexity. The more complex it gets, whether in the workplace, in life, and what have you, the more emotional maturity you need. Why? Because tough situations tend to arouse within us emotions or high emotions, right? Today, we live in a world where depression, is probably at its highest, simply because we're dealing with a lot of change. We're dealing with rapid change and things that have changed, overnight. COVID-19 that came in, and many people, found themselves not knowing how to deal with this. And I dare say it's probably because a lot more of us need to work on our emotional intelligence. So Why? Because emotional intelligence empowers your ability to handle complexity. Number three, emotional intelligence enables diversity management, especially as a leader. When you are emotionally intelligent, you're able to deal with a diversity of people, diversity of cultures, and just purely having an ability to appreciate, different viewpoints, different and differences in other people as opposed to yourself. Number four, EQ cushions the blow of constructive feedback. Whew, this is an important one. Many people, as I said in the beginning, that many of us fail to take in feedback positively from others. Why? Because our emotional intelligence hasn't been trained sufficiently yet. But if you work on it, you're able to take any feedback, even if it's maliciously intended. But you're able to take it. You are cushioned because you are trained to be self-aware and to manage your emotions. Yes, the next benefit. EQ makes you a more versatile leader. I think I've already touched on this one. The next one is that EQ breeds the resilience that is required in a fast-changing environment, right? I think I've touched on this already. We live in a world and in a time, in a season, and a generation where things are changing and moving so rapidly that in the absence of emotional intelligence, one can be a constant victim and feel like everything is happening so fast, I don't know how to keep up. And indeed, many of us have those days. But if you train your emotions, if you train yourself to the extent where you look at it and you say, how do I take this and make it work for me instead of working against me? Let me give you the last two thoughts here as we end today's episode. EQ may well be the difference between your now and your next. Why am I saying this? Particularly from a career perspective. Yes, you can go to school, get all the degrees you want, get the MBA, get the PhD, get the honors, get the degree, whatever it is. But I want to tell you now without a shadow of doubt, and this is from sheer personal experience, that your next, meaning your next dimension of your career, the next dimension of your growth, your personal growth, may well be the catalyst, and the difference between whether you move from here to your next may well be just your ability to handle your emotions, your emotional intelligence. If you just purely work on that, because by getting your degrees and all of that, it already proves that you've got the IQ. But if you do not work on your EQ, you may find yourself limited and you may find yourself doubting yourself. But in actual fact, it's not that you're not intelligent. It's just that you need to work on your emotional intelligence a lot more than you already have worked so hard on your intelligence, as it were, your cognitive intelligence. Lastly, EQ demands that you reflect more on your own actions and thoughts. I've already touched on this, but I want to end on it and say, take time to reflect. Take time when you've been in a conflict situation, when you've been in a tough situation, take time out and reflect and say, could I have done things differently? Could I have said that differently? Why did I act this way instead of the other way? You're going to find that the more you do that, it will be strange at the beginning, but the more you do it, the more enriched your engagements are going to become. Increasingly, you're going to become a more present husband, wife, a more present mother, father, a more present human being, altogether, a more present, a team player in the context of work and wherever it is that you operate or that you ply your trade. It just the ability to reflect more on your own actions and thoughts just enriches how you show up and you become a wholesome human being. So, ladies and gents, as we end it here today, I believe this has been impactful. I hope certainly you found it as such. Let's pay attention to this very important ability that is called emotional intelligence. It's a competence that is hard. That is, I think, we need a lot more spoken spoken about it and engagement on it. And I don't think it's getting enough airtime. But certainly, it has proven to be one of the most important competencies of the 21st century. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. Continue to share, our episodes. We are now officially on YouTube as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many other platforms wherever you get your favorite podcast. And please do share and share within your network. Thank you for your support. as we close today's episode. Until next time, in the only way that we do it in the SimplyLebo podcast, what do we say? Hey, tada!